I knew something was terribly wrong the moment my son could not look me in the eye while asking me to leave my own life behind. At 71 years old, I thought I had already experienced every kind of heartbreak a person could survive. I had buried my husband of 46 years. I had learned how to sleep alone in a house that once felt full of laughter. I had spent countless evenings staring at the empty chair across from me at the dinner table. But nothing prepared me for the night my own son sat across from me and acted as if I had become a problem that needed to be solved. It started with what was supposed to be a family dinner. My son Ryan and his wife Ashley invited me to their house on a Thursday evening. Ashley insisted it was important. She sounded unusually cheerful on the phone. "We just want to spend time together," she told me. "It has been too long." At first, I was touched by the invitation. Since my husband passed away 8 months earlier, family gatherings had become less frequent. Ryan was busy with work. Ashley always seemed occupied with one project or another. I missed them more than I admitted. I arrived carrying a homemade apple pie, the same recipe Ryan had loved since he was a little boy. Ashley greeted me warmly at the door. Her smile was flawless. Too flawless. Looking back, I should have noticed it immediately. The house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread. Everything looked perfect, almost staged. During dinner, the conversation remained pleasant. We talked about the weather, local news, and Megan's graduate school classes. Ryan laughed at the right moments. Ashley asked thoughtful questions. Yet beneath the surface, something felt different. Every time I mentioned future plans, Ryan seemed uncomfortable. Every time I talked about my home, Ashley quickly changed the subject. About halfway through dessert, Ashley placed her fork down and folded her hands neatly in front of her. The room suddenly felt quieter. Ryan stared at his coffee cup. My stomach tightened. "Carol," Ashley began softly, "we have been talking about your future." I forced a smile. "My future?" Ryan finally looked up. His expression was strained. "Mom, we just want what is best for you." Those words are rarely followed by anything good. I felt it immediately. The air in the room changed. Ashley continued speaking before I could respond. She explained that maintaining a house alone was becoming difficult for someone my age. She mentioned safety concerns. She mentioned convenience. Then she mentioned assisted living communities. For several seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. "Are you suggesting I move into a nursing facility?" I asked. Ryan lowered his eyes. Ashley nodded sympathetically. "We think it might be the right next step." My heart sank. Not because of the suggestion itself. Many people choose those communities and live happy lives. What hurt was realizing they had already made this decision without me. I could see it in the way they spoke. This was not a conversation. It was a presentation. A conclusion they had reached before I ever entered the room. "I am perfectly capable of living on my own," I said calmly. Ashley exchanged a quick glance with Ryan. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. There was something hidden inside that look. Something neither of them wanted to say out loud. Ryan finally spoke. "Mom, maybe it is time to think about simplifying things." Simplifying things. The phrase echoed in my mind during the drive home later that night. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes. The porch light illuminated the front of the house my husband and I had built together decades earlier. Suddenly, a terrible realization settled over me. They were not asking me to move for my benefit. They wanted me out of the way. And somehow, I knew that was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up hoping the previous evening would feel less unsettling in the light of day. It did not. In fact, the more I thought about the conversation, the more certain I became that something important had happened beneath the surface. Ryan and Ashley had not been offering suggestions. They had been introducing a plan. I spent the morning tending the flower beds behind the house, trying to clear my thoughts. My husband, Richard, had planted most of those flowers himself. Every spring he insisted on adding something new. Looking across the yard, I could still picture him kneeling beside the garden with dirt on his hands and a smile on his face. This house held nearly 5 decades of memories. The idea that I would simply leave it behind because someone else thought it was convenient felt absurd. Around noon my phone rang. It was Ashley. Her cheerful tone returned immediately. "I just wanted to check on you," she said. We were worried after our conversation last night. Worried. The word sounded rehearsed. I am doing fine, I replied. I appreciate the concern. There was a brief pause. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. Ryan and I spent months researching options. We really think this is the best path forward. Months. I almost dropped the phone. Months. That single word confirmed everything I had suspected. They had not reached this conclusion recently. They had been planning it for a long time. While I believed we were grieving together as a family, they had been preparing a future that apparently did not include me. I ended the call politely and spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about that one detail. Months. The following day, I stopped by Ryan's house unexpectedly. I had baked banana bread and decided not to call ahead. It was something mothers used to do before everyone became obsessed with scheduling every moment of their lives. Ashley answered the door looking genuinely surprised to see me. For a fraction of a second, panic flashed across her face before the smile returned. "Carol," she said. "What a nice surprise." The reaction immediately caught my attention. Inside, Ryan was still at work. Ashley invited me into the kitchen and offered coffee. While she prepared it, I noticed a folder sitting partially hidden beneath a stack of magazines on the counter. A photograph was visible near the top. First, I paid little attention. Then I realized what I was looking at. It was a brochure. Not just any brochure. A brochure for a luxury senior living community located nearly 60 miles away. I recognized the logo instantly because Ashley had mentioned it during dinner. My pulse quickened. I glanced at the folder again. Several colored tabs protruded from the side. Notes had been attached. Pages were marked. This was not casual research. This was active planning. Ashley quickly noticed where I was looking and moved the folder out of sight. The motion was subtle but impossible to miss. "Just some paperwork," she said lightly. I nodded and pretended not to care. But something had changed. For the first time, I was no longer questioning whether they had a plan. I knew they did. The only mystery was why they seemed so eager to move me out of the picture. Later that evening, as I sat alone in Richard's study sorting through old family photographs, another thought entered my mind. If Ryan and Ashley had spent months planning where I would go, what else had they spent months planning? I looked around the room at the shelves filled with records, financial files, and decades of family history. Suddenly, the brochures were not what worried me most. What worried me was the possibility that the nursing home conversation had never been the real goal at all. 3 days later, I received the answer to a question I had not even known how to ask. It happened completely by accident. At least that is what I thought at the time. On Saturday afternoon, I drove to the grocery store on the other side of town. After picking up a few things, I stopped at a small coffee shop nearby. Richard and I used to visit that place every weekend. The owner still remembered my name. I ordered a cup of coffee and sat near the window. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Megan. My granddaughter sounded distracted. "Grandma, are you home?" she asked. "No," I replied. "Why?" There was a brief silence. "I just stopped by your house to drop something off, but nobody answered." I frowned. "I have been out all afternoon." Another pause followed. Then Megan said something that made me sit up straighter. "That is strange. I thought I saw Dad's truck parked down the street." My stomach tightened. Ryan knew I was out because I had mentioned my errands during a phone call the previous evening. First, I dismissed the thought. There could be dozens of explanations. But once the idea entered my mind, it refused to leave. When I returned home about an hour later, everything appeared normal. The front door was locked. The windows were closed. Nothing seemed out of place. Still, a strange feeling lingered. That evening, while organizing paperwork in Richard's study, I noticed something unusual. A drawer that I rarely opened was not fully closed. It was off by less than an inch. Most people would never have noticed. I did. Richard had always been meticulous. So was I. I opened the drawer and examined its contents. Family records, old tax returns, insurance papers. Everything appeared intact. Then I found myself checking more carefully. One folder had been moved from the back of the drawer to the front. Another sat upside down. Tiny details. Yet together they felt significant. The next morning I attended church as usual. After the service, I joined several friends for breakfast. During the conversation, one of them casually mentioned seeing Ashley at a local bank 2 days earlier. The comment seemed innocent enough. Ashley was entitled to visit any bank she wanted. The problem was that the bank she mentioned was not the one Ashley normally used. It was the same institution where Richard had maintained several long-term investment accounts. My coffee suddenly tasted different, bitter. I spent the remainder of the day trying to convince myself that none of these things were connected. Ryan's truck, the moved files, Ashley at the bank. Each event could be explained on its own, but when viewed together they formed a pattern. By Monday evening I could no longer ignore it. I went into Richard's study and began reviewing every financial record I could find. Most of the files contained information I already knew. Retirement accounts, property taxes, savings records. Then I discovered something I had completely forgotten existed. Near the back of an old filing cabinet sat a sealed envelope marked with Richard's handwriting. My name was written across the front. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. Richard explained that several years earlier, he had made certain financial arrangements that he intentionally discussed with very few people. He believed privacy protected families from unnecessary conflict. Near the bottom of the page, he referenced an investment partnership that had performed far better than either of us expected. Attached to the letter was a summary statement. I stared at the number printed on the page. Then I looked again. The value exceeded $1 million. Suddenly, every strange conversation, every brochure, every uncomfortable glance, every secretive discussion felt different. Much different, because for the first time, I began to wonder whether Ashley and Ryan were not trying to move me into a nursing facility because they were worried about me. I began to wonder if they were trying to move me out of the way before I discovered what Richard had left behind. For the next 2 days, I told no one about the letter. Not Ryan, not Ashley, not even Megan. I wanted time to think. More importantly, I wanted to understand exactly what Richard had left behind before anyone realized I knew about it. The envelope remained locked inside my desk drawer, while I quietly continued my normal routine. Outwardly, nothing changed. Inwardly, everything had. Every conversation suddenly carried a different meaning. Every smile felt worth examining. Every unexpected phone call made me wonder what information the caller hoped to gain. On Wednesday morning, I decided to contact the only person Richard had trusted with nearly every major financial decision during the last 15 years of his life. Daniel Harper. Daniel was an attorney who specialized in estate planning and financial structures. He had helped Richard organize several investments years earlier. I still had his number. When I called, he recognized my voice immediately. "Carol," he said warmly, "how are you holding up?" We spoke for a few minutes before I mentioned the letter. The silence on the other end of the line lasted longer than I expected. "I think we should meet," Daniel finally said. "As soon as possible." The next afternoon I drove to his office. The building sat in a quiet business district about 20 miles from my home. Daniel greeted me personally and escorted me into a private conference room. After reading Richard's letter, he leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "I was wondering when you would find this." My heart skipped a beat. "You knew about it?" Daniel folded his hands. "Richard instructed me to keep certain matters confidential, unless you specifically asked about them, or discovered the records yourself." I stared at him. "How much are we talking about?" Daniel opened a folder and slid several documents across the table. I studied the numbers. Then I studied them again. The investment partnership Richard mentioned had grown dramatically over the years. Combined with several related holdings, the total value now exceeded $1.3 million. For several seconds I could not speak. Richard and I had always lived comfortably, but we were never extravagant. Seeing that number on paper felt surreal. Then Daniel said something that changed everything. "There is another reason I wanted to meet in person." My stomach tightened. Daniel opened a second folder. Inside were communication records. Several months before Richard passed away, someone had contacted his office requesting information about future distributions connected to the investment structure. "Who?" I asked quietly. Daniel looked directly at me. "Ashley." The room suddenly felt smaller. "Ashley contacted you?" He nodded. "More than once." I felt a chill move through me. Daniel explained that Ashley had asked surprisingly detailed questions. She wanted to know how ownership transferred after a death. She wanted clarification about beneficiaries. She wanted to understand the timeline for accessing certain assets. At the time, Daniel refused to discuss anything because she lacked authorization. The requests seemed unusual, but not alarming. Now they looked very different. Did Ryan know? I asked. Daniel hesitated. I cannot answer that with certainty. But Ashley was not asking beginner questions. She seemed to have information most people would not possess. I looked down at the documents spread across the table. Suddenly, every strange moment from the past few months lined up perfectly. The nursing home brochures, the pressure to move, the hidden conversations, the visit to the bank. None of it felt random anymore. As our meeting ended, Daniel offered one piece of advice. Do not confront anyone yet. If people believe you know nothing, they tend to reveal far more than they intend. On the drive home, I replayed those words repeatedly. That evening, Ryan called. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. He asked about my week. He asked whether I had given more thought to simplifying my living situation. I answered calmly. I even thanked him for his concern. Meanwhile, I looked out the window at the house Richard and I had built together and realized something important. Ashley already knew about the money. The question was no longer whether she wanted access to it. The question was how far she was willing to go to get it. I followed Daniel's advice exactly. I did not confront Ashley. I did not question Ryan. Most importantly, I did not reveal that I knew anything about the investment partnership. Instead, I became the person they expected me to be. A grieving widow, a lonely mother, an aging woman who trusted her family completely. The role was easier to play than I cared to admit. Over the following weeks, I noticed a remarkable change in Ashley's behavior. She became more attentive than ever. She called frequently. She offered to help with errands. She even volunteered to organize some of Richard's remaining paperwork. Months earlier, I might have interpreted her actions as kindness. Now I saw them differently. Every offer seemed connected to information. Every conversation appeared designed to learn what I knew and what I did not. One Saturday afternoon, Ashley arrived at my house carrying lunch from my favorite restaurant. She was cheerful and energetic. As we sat in the kitchen, she casually steered the conversation toward finances. Have you thought about downsizing? She asked. I smiled politely. Not really. She nodded thoughtfully. Managing a large property alone can be expensive. There it was again. The house. The future. The idea of removing me from the place Richard and I had built together. I pretended to consider her advice while watching her carefully. Then I said something deliberate. To be honest, I have not paid much attention to the finances since Richard passed away. Most of that always overwhelmed me. The effect was immediate. Ashley relaxed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. It was the reaction of someone receiving reassuring news. For the remainder of the afternoon, she seemed unusually comfortable. When she finally left, I sat by the window and thought about everything Daniel had told me. People reveal more when they believe they are safe. A few days later, another piece of the puzzle appeared unexpectedly. Megan stopped by after class. She looked troubled. After a few minutes of small talk, she asked whether everything was all right between me and her parents. The question surprised me. Why would you ask that? Megan hesitated. Because they have been talking about you constantly lately. My pulse quickened. She explained that Ashley frequently discussed my living situation. More than seemed normal. There were conversations about timelines, discussions about selling property, comments about what life would look like after certain changes were made. Megan did not know specific details, but she knew enough to feel uncomfortable. Then she mentioned something else. Earlier that week, she overheard Ashley discussing a luxury home development outside the city. The home started well above $800,000. Ashley spoke about them as though purchasing one was merely a matter of time. I remained calm while listening, but inside my suspicions deepened. Ryan and Ashley were living comfortably, but not comfortably enough to support the future Ashley seemed to envision, unless she expected a substantial amount of money to become available. That evening, I reviewed additional documents Daniel had provided. Buried among the records was a communication log from several months earlier. One entry immediately caught my attention. A caller had contacted a financial representative seeking clarification regarding future asset distributions connected to an investment structure. The identity of the caller was not officially recorded, but the questions mirrored those Ashley had previously asked Daniel. Timeline, access, transfer procedures, future, ownership. The same themes appeared again and again. The more evidence I gathered, the clearer the picture became. Ashley was not acting on impulse. This was a long-term strategy, a carefully planned effort that had likely begun long before Richard's death. The most painful realization involved Ryan. Every day, I hoped to discover he knew nothing. Every day, the evidence made that hope harder to maintain. One evening, as I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. He wanted to schedule another family dinner. He said Ashley had exciting news to share about the future. I stared at the screen for several seconds before replying. That sounds wonderful. Then I set the phone aside and looked at Richard's photograph on my nightstand. Because for the first time, I had a feeling that Ashley was about to reveal more than she intended. The dinner took place the following Friday evening. Ryan sounded unusually excited when he called to confirm the time. Ashley sounded even more enthusiastic when she texted me the address and reminded me not to be late. By the time I arrived, I already suspected that whatever news they planned to share had something to do with the future Ashley had been carefully constructing for months. The moment I stepped inside their house, I noticed subtle changes. A stack of glossy real estate magazines sat on the coffee table. Several brochures were spread across a side counter. Photographs of luxury homes filled a tablet screen lying face up on the kitchen island. None of it looked accidental. It looked like preparation. During dinner, Ashley dominated the conversation. She talked about neighborhoods. She talked about property values. She talked about schools, even though Megan had already finished college. Ryan smiled often, but something about him seemed different. He looked nervous. Not unhappy. Nervous. As though he knew a conversation was coming that he could no longer avoid. After dessert, Ashley leaned forward with visible excitement. "We have some wonderful news," she announced. Ryan glanced down at the table before forcing a smile. Ashley continued before he could speak. She explained that they had been exploring opportunities to improve their lives, new possibilities, bigger goals, long-term plans. Then she pulled out several photographs of an impressive luxury home located outside the city. The property was enormous. It sat on several acres of land and featured everything from a private guest house to a large outdoor entertainment area. Even a quick estimate placed the value well above $1 million. Ashley studied my reaction carefully. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked. I nodded politely. "It certainly is." Ryan remained unusually quiet. Ashley spoke as though ownership of the property was already within reach. The confidence in her voice caught my attention immediately. People do not normally discuss purchases of that scale, unless they believe the money already exists somewhere. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Throughout the evening, Ashley repeatedly referenced the future. She spoke about timing. She spoke about transitions. She spoke about opportunities that would become available very soon. Each comment sounded harmless on its own. Together, they painted a different picture. Eventually, Ryan stepped outside to answer a phone call. For the first time all evening, Ashley and I sat alone. A strange silence settled between us. Then she smiled and asked a question that revealed far more than she intended. "Have you made any progress sorting through Richard's old financial records?" My heart remained steady, but every alarm inside me began ringing. There it was. The question she truly wanted answered. Not the house. Not the nursing facility. Not the future. The records. I shrugged casually. "Not really. There is so much paperwork." Ashley's shoulders visibly relaxed. "I understand. It can take a long time." We changed the subject immediately afterward, but the damage was done. She had confirmed exactly what I needed to know. The records still mattered to her. More importantly, she did not know what I had already discovered. When I returned home later that night, I found a voicemail waiting from Daniel. The message was brief. He had received additional information related to several inquiries made months earlier regarding Richard's investment. Partnership. He wanted to discuss the findings in person. I listened to the message twice. Then I sat quietly in Richard's study staring at the photograph on my desk. Ashley was becoming bolder. Her questions were becoming more direct. Her confidence was growing. Meanwhile, Daniel had found something new. For the first time, I had the feeling that the trail was about to lead somewhere neither Ryan nor Ashley expected. The next morning, I met Daniel at his office. The moment I entered the conference room, I could tell he had found something important. Several folders were spread across the table. Notes covered multiple pages. Daniel removed his glasses and motioned for me to sit. "I think we finally understand what Ashley has been doing," he said. My stomach tightened. For months, I had been following scattered clues. Now those clues were beginning to connect. Daniel opened the first folder and showed me a series of communication records connected to Richard's investment partnership. Most were routine. A few were not. Over the previous year, multiple inquiries had been submitted through different channels. Some were directed toward financial institutions, others toward legal offices. Each inquiry appeared unrelated on the surface, but when viewed together, they formed a clear pattern. Someone had been gathering information about future ownership, asset transfers, beneficiary structures, and distribution timelines. The same questions appeared repeatedly. The same areas of interest surfaced again and again. Then Daniel showed me something else. Several months before Richard's death, Ashley had attended a financial seminar hosted by a local investment group. Her registration information was attached to the records. Normally that would mean very little. What caught Daniel's attention was a follow-up consultation request submitted shortly afterward. The request specifically referenced inheritance planning and future access to investment holdings. Ashley's name appeared on the document. I stared at the page for several seconds. "She was planning this before Richard even passed away," I said quietly. Daniel nodded. "That is exactly what concerns me." The room fell silent. Suddenly many things made sense. The unusual questions, the pressure to move, the constant focus on the future. Ashley had not suddenly become interested in finances after Richard died. She had been laying groundwork long before that. Then Daniel opened another folder. Inside were public records related to recent financial activity connected to Ryan and Ashley. Everything was legal, nothing improper. But the spending patterns revealed something interesting. Over the past several months, they had begun making commitments that exceeded what I believed their income comfortably supported. Reservation deposits, property consultations, design planning meetings, luxury home visits. None of these things proved wrongdoing. What they revealed was confidence. The confidence of people who expected a significant amount of money to become available. "They are acting like the future is already guaranteed," Daniel said. I could not disagree. That afternoon, I drove home and spent several hours reflecting on everything I had learned. For the first time, anger began replacing confusion. Not because of the money itself. Richard and I had never measured success by account balances. What hurt was realizing how long this had been developing behind my back. While I believed we were sharing family holidays, birthdays, and Sunday dinners, Ashley appeared to be studying opportunities, looking for pathways, preparing for a future she had no right to assume belonged to her. A few days later, Megan visited again. She looked troubled. After a long pause, she told me she had recently argued with her parents. Apparently, Ashley had become increasingly focused on plans involving a new house. More concerning, she often spoke as though major financial changes were inevitable. "It is strange, Grandma," Megan said. "Sometimes she talks like something has already been decided." I listened carefully but revealed nothing. Before leaving, Megan mentioned one final detail. Ashley had recently ordered architectural renderings for renovations to a property she did not even own. The moment Megan left, I sat alone in Richard's study and stared out the window. The evidence was becoming overwhelming. Ashley was not merely hoping for a better future. She was behaving like someone who believed she had already secured it. The problem was that the future she imagined depended on assumptions she could not control. And for the first time, I realized something important. Ashley thought she was ahead of everyone else. She thought she understood the entire picture. What she did not know was that Richard had left behind more than money. He had left behind safeguards. And soon, those safeguards were going to matter very much. A week later, I put the final piece of my plan into motion. Every year, Richard's birthday brought the family together. Even after his passing, everyone still gathered to remember him. This year would be no different. At least that was what everyone believed. I invited the entire family to my house for dinner on what would have been Richard's 74th birthday. Ryan accepted immediately. Ashley seemed delighted. Megan agreed to come. Several cousins, my sister Linda, and a few longtime family friends also planned to attend. Outwardly, it was a simple family gathering. In reality, it was something very different. During the days leading up to the dinner, Daniel and I met twice more. By then, he had assembled a complete timeline. Every inquiry, every consultation request, every attempt to gather information regarding Richard's investment partnership. None of the records alone told the full story. Together, however, they revealed months of preparation. More importantly, they revealed intent. Daniel also reviewed Richard's estate documents in detail. That was when I learned about the safeguard Richard had quietly established years earlier. The investment partnership could not be accessed, transferred, modified, or redirected without multiple levels of authorization. Even after Richard's death, ownership remained protected. In other words, all the planning Ashley had been doing rested on assumptions that were never legally possible. When Daniel explained this, I finally understood why Richard had always been so careful. He believed money should support family, not destroy it. The evening of the dinner arrived. I spent most of the afternoon preparing the house. Family photographs filled the living room. Richard's favorite music played softly through the speakers. His old fishing hat rested beside a framed portrait near the fireplace. Everything looked warm and familiar. By 6 o'clock, guests began arriving. Megan arrived first and helped me organize refreshments. My sister Linda came shortly afterward. Then cousins and family friends followed. Ryan and Ashley arrived last. The moment Ashley stepped through the front door, I noticed something unusual. She looked confident, more confident than I had ever seen her. She greeted everyone warmly and immediately began talking about future plans, new opportunities, exciting changes, fresh beginnings. Several times throughout the evening, she referenced major life transitions that would soon take place. Ryan smiled politely, but his enthusiasm seemed forced. As dinner progressed, I watched them carefully. Ashley laughed easily. Ryan remained distracted. More than once, I caught him staring at the family photographs on the walls. He looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. After dessert, I stood and thanked everyone for coming. The room gradually became quiet. Glasses were lowered. Conversations stopped. Every face turned toward me. "Before we finish tonight," I said, "there is something I would like to share." Ashley smiled politely. Ryan shifted in his chair. I continued, "Over the past several months, I have spent a great deal of time learning things I never expected to learn." The room became noticeably still. Ashley's smile faded slightly. Then came a knock at the front door. Several guests looked confused. Megan stood and opened it. Daniel Harper stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. The moment Ryan saw him, the color drained from his face. Ashley's expression froze completely. Daniel greeted everyone politely before joining us in the living room. He placed the briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were folders, documents, records, timelines, months of carefully organized information. No accusations were made. No dramatic speeches were necessary. The evidence would speak for itself. As Daniel prepared the first folder, I looked around. The room. Every person I cared about was present. Every secret, every lie, every hidden plan had finally arrived at the same moment. For months, Ashley believed she was building a future nobody could stop. What she did not realize was that the truth had been quietly building something of its own. And that truth was finally ready to be heard. For several long seconds after Daniel opened the first folder, nobody spoke. The room was completely silent except for the faint sound of the clock above the fireplace. Daniel proceeded calmly. He presented the timeline one piece at a time. Communication records, consultation requests, financial inquiries, property research, questions regarding inheritance structures. None of the information was dramatic on its own. The power came from seeing everything together. Each document connected to the next. Every inquiry pointed in the same direction. Ashley's confidence slowly disappeared as the evidence accumulated. The smile she had worn all evening vanished entirely. Ryan looked as though he wanted to disappear. Several family members exchanged stunned glances. My sister Linda stared at the table in disbelief. Megan sat quietly beside me, her expression filled with disappointment. Daniel eventually reached the final section of the presentation. That was when he explained Richard's safeguards. He described how the investment partnership had been intentionally structured years earlier. Ownership protections, authorization requirements, legal barriers, multiple layers designed to prevent anyone from manipulating the assets. The irony was impossible to ignore. Months of planning had been built around assumptions that were never legally possible. The future Ashley imagined could not exist in the way she believed. When Daniel finished, the room remained silent. Ashley finally spoke first. She attempted to explain her actions. She claimed she was only trying to help prepare for the future. She insisted her questions were innocent. She said there had been misunderstandings. But each explanation sounded weaker than the one before it. The documents contradicted too much. Then something happened that I had not expected. Ryan stood up. His hands trembled slightly. He looked around the room before finally turning toward me. "Mom," he said quietly, "I am sorry." The words hung in the air. Ashley immediately tried to interrupt, but Ryan continued. For the first time all evening, he spoke honestly. He admitted that Ashley had become increasingly focused on the investment after learning fragments of information over the years. He admitted that conversations about my future had become tied to assumptions about money. He admitted that he should have stopped everything long ago. Most painful of all, he admitted that he allowed himself to believe their actions were somehow justified. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody argued. The truth was doing all the work. Ashley lowered her eyes and said nothing more. The confidence that had carried her through the previous months was gone. The dream she had been building had collapsed under the weight of reality. One by one, family members began leaving. Several hugged me before they departed. Others simply expressed quiet support. Eventually, only a few people remained. Daniel packed his files. Megan embraced me tightly. Ryan lingered near the doorway. Before leaving, he approached me slowly. His eyes were filled with regret. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did." I studied his face for several moments. I saw sadness there. Shame. Genuine remorse. "That is where healing begins," I replied softly. He nodded and walked away. In the months that followed, life became quieter. Daniel ensured every financial structure remained exactly as Richard intended. The investment stayed protected. No assets were lost. No ownership changed. The house remained mine. More importantly, my peace remained mine. Ryan continued reaching out from time to time. Rebuilding trust would take years if it happened at all. Ashley kept her distance. Megan visited often. We spent afternoons gardening, drinking coffee, and sharing stories about Richard. Little by little, normal life returned. One evening near the end of summer, I sat alone on the back porch watching the sun settle behind the trees Richard planted decades earlier. A warm breeze moved through the yard. Birds crossed the orange sky. For the first time in a very long time, I felt calm. As I looked across the property, I thought about everything that had happened. The pressure, the secrets, the manipulation, the investigation, the truth. Then I remembered something Richard once told me. He said that money never changes character. It reveals it. In the end, that was exactly what happened. The investment was never the real story. The real story was what people were willing to sacrifice in pursuit of it. Some lost trust. Some lost dignity. Some lost relationships that may never fully recover. As for me, I gained something far more valuable than money. I gained certainty. I learned who truly stood beside me. And as the last sunlight faded beyond the horizon, I realized that no fortune on earth could ever be worth more than that.